so much, and it is absolutely my pleasure to welcome you all to the first Queen Bee Coaching Radical Thinking Times series. We're thrilled that there's so many people from all over the world on the call joining us for some ideas and inspiration during these times of isolation. So my name's Sarah David, and I'm a management consultant and executive coach, and I volunteer with Queen Bee as a coach, and I also sit on the steering group. And we developed this series because we wanted to spread the word about Queen Bee coaching. Why? Because Queen Bee coaching offers free coaching to women in leadership who wouldn't otherwise be able to access coaching. And it's our belief that by increasing skills and confidence of these already brilliant women, that we'll accelerate their ability to move into positions of power and help us change the world. So if you're on this call and you are somebody who's in a corporate, community or volunteer leadership role, and you would like to get yourself a coach, appearing in the chat box shortly is going to be a link for you to the website for you to be able to register to apply to become a coach. Or if you're on this call and you are a coach and you want to volunteer and join one of the over 50 women who are already providing free coaching to these women, we'd love you to register with us too. So you can go to the Queen Bee website and do that. And in everything we do, we aim to reflect the diversity, the dynamism and the demographics of Greater Manchester. So QBC, Queen Bee Coaching, is a Pankhurst Trust Service. So Emmeline Pankhurst held the first meeting of the movement that became the suffragette movement, banner in the back, at number 62 Nelson Street in Manchester. And the Pankhurst Trust incorporates the Pankhurst Centre, so that's the preservation of this historic site. So when lockdown finishes, even if you're somewhere else today, if you ever happen to be in Manchester, on a Thursday afternoon, go and stand in the room in which these women started that movement. Well, I've got shivers down my spine remembering standing there myself. The Trust, though, is also the home to Manchester Women's Aid, and I'm sure a lot of you are aware there's just been a huge increase in domestic violence and abuse, help and support needed because of the global lockdown. And the Pankhurst, the Manchester Women's Aid aren't getting any government emergency funding right now. So they're faced with two challenges. One, significant increase in need. And number two, providing the PPE, the protective equipment, to all of those people who are in refuge. And for anyone who's had to buy it, it's very expensive. So if any of you are able, please, to make a donation, however large or small, to the Pankhurst Trust at this time, it would be really gratefully accepted. And a link's going to appear in the box. And we'd like to thank CMS UK for their financial donation as part of their support to these series of talks. So before I get to today's talk, just want to plug the second one. So that's going to be on the 11th of June at 2:30. And we're going to hear from the brilliant Hilary Cottam. So she's written this book, Radical Help. And what we will hear in that talk is somebody speaking about how they're addressing the knottiest issues facing us from a social welfare point. Teenage depression, poor health, how do you get a good job, and age and loneliness, how are we tackling these issues? So another link will appear in your chat box shortly, and we encourage you to open up all of these and then come back to them later. Register on the Eventbrite for that. You're using the chat to say hello, so I don't need to remind you on that. And you've also been asked, if you've got any questions for Ailsa coming up, just put a question mark at the front of your question and then the question. So now I get to introduce and welcome our interviewer, Circle Steele, who's the CEO of the Wai Yin Society. And the Wai Yin Society supports, empowers and partners with Chinese individuals and families. And it's one of the largest BME community centres in Greater Manchester. And Circle is a consistent champion of cultural diversity. Been such a pleasure getting to know her as part of these talks. And so I'm really thrilled to hand you over to her now, Circle.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everybody. There's a huge audience here. Now, I would like to welcome Dr. Ailsa Holland. She's one of our co-creators of On This Day She, a Twitter account with over 20,000 followers, which aims to put women back into history, one day at a time. Dr. Holland studied literature, history, and women study at the University of Oxford, York, and Southampton, and her poems have been publicized in journals. She was also nominated Manchester Cathedral Poet of the Year 2019. Now, Ailsa, I would like to give you a Chinese name called Ailsa, which means lovely sand. I'm not a poet, but I think it highlights the impact you are making on many people, particularly in giving women a place in history, like one grain of sand at a time, until we see a beautiful beach.
Oh.
Now, first of all, I wonder if you can talk us through how On This Day She began.
Well, On This Day She began with a calendar that was given to us as a Christmas present. It was for the year 2017. And it was an On This Day in History calendar. So for every day, there was a historical event that had happened on that day at some point. And as we went through the year, I just realized that there were so few women mentioned. And that really made me cross. And so I talked to some friends about it, writer friends, Jo Bell and Tania Hershman, and they felt the same as me. And we wondered what we could do about it, how we could balance that out, how we could make women from history more visible. And we decided on a Twitter account. And a few months later, On This Day She was born.
Oh, it sounds like you feel a lot of range anger towards the On This Day calendar. There are a lot of negative connotations like thinking with female anger range. But it can actually be a really powerful tool for change, can it?
Yeah, I mean, I felt a lot of rage. I don't like the feeling of rage, but I have it a lot of the time. And I've realized that the only way to get rid of it is to do something that I wouldn't have done if I hadn't felt angry. So I might write a poem or organize a demo. I think all radical acts or ideas or, radical movements start surely with rage at some sort of injustice. But I think women are discouraged from feeling anger. And we kind of comply with that because we think if we're angry, well, nobody will love us. And so I think that denies us that energy that can come from rage, which, if it's channeled in a positive way, can, make change and remake society.
I think women have got a lot of creative idea now. I think I can see you can unlock their potential.
Yeah.
But you have said you were worried you may not find enough women's story to share every day. Talk us through what was behind that feeling, and has it changed now because of On This Day She?
Yeah, I was worried because even though I've studied history. I've mostly studied it as a context for literature, but I have studied history, and I couldn't think off the top of my head of that many women, certainly not 365. But yes, that's totally changed. I mean, since Tania, Jo and I started looking into this for the research for the Twitter account, we've just come across so many women whose stories have been unearthed by historians, mostly female historians, and then they've made these stories available either in books or online. So yes, now we don't worry at all. In fact, we know that we're never going to run out of women. We're swimming in interesting women.
I mean, not only swimming, also I can see you building up a beautiful sandy beach here.
Yeah.
Now, can you tell us about some of your favorite women you have discovered it through running On This Day She?
Okay. Well, yeah. How long have you got? So many. So I'll tell you about one who's a favorite of mine called Ida Pfeiffer. So she was born in Vienna in Austria at the end of the 18th century. And she always wanted to travel, from being a child, but was never able to do that because, she was a girl and then, she was a wife and mother. So when she was 45 and both of her sons had grown up and left home, She left her husband and set off down the Danube and went to the Holy Land. And she also traveled to Scandinavia. She traveled around the world twice. And she funded her travels by writing travel journals and then publishing them and selling them when she got back. And they were massively successful, translated into several languages. And she also taught herself how to preserve natural specimens, botanical specimens or mineral specimens, which she then sold to museums. On her last journey, she got caught up in a coup against the Queen Ranavalona of Madagascar, who was pretty scary lady, actually, very murderous. And Ida Pfeiffer managed to survive that, but she did catch malaria in Madagascar and died not long afterwards. And she's buried in the Vienna Central Cemetery. She's the first woman to be buried in the honoured dead section. And I love her story because of the adventure, and she must have been so brave, but also because she did it when she was 45, and I think it's so easy to think that if we haven't done something by the time we're 30, then it's too late. And, and I think she reminds us that if you don't get a chance to do something when you're younger, for whatever reason, maybe you can do it later on.
Yeah, it's a very good example. Wow, not just 45, maybe 55 like me.
Yeah.
You have hope, okay.
Yeah, anyway.
Yeah. So not all the women you include have a positive impact on society. Now, why did you decide to include the bad woman as well?
Well, because we want to include women in history on the same basis and on the same terms that men are included. So, if only good men were included in history books, the history books would be a lot thinner, I think, and we feel like it's another requirement on women to be kind of support people, in the sense that they're, a wife, a mother, a muse, a historical inspiration, and that requirement isn't put on men. We get quite a lot of stick for this on Twitter, actually, from women as well as men. Well, why have you included her? That's not a good example. But yeah, so we include morally questionable women. We include bad leaders, pirates, murderers, because although a lot of the women we include have made a fantastic contribution to society and have helped other people and whatever, we feel that everybody from history, all the stories, make us ask questions about the time in which those people lived. There was a gang of women in 17th century Italy who made their money by selling poisons to other women to get rid of their husbands, and that leads us to the question, well, why? Why was that necessary? So yeah, that's why we do it.
Well, but you're quite right. Or like 100 years ago, suffragette women, they fight for their voting right and end up going to prison.
Yeah.
And if in your TED Talk, Ailsa, you say, we are conditioned by tokenism to think of these women as exceptions. Can you explain what you mean by this a bit more?
Yes. Okay. So tokenism, including one person from a minority or an oppressed group in order to be able to say, well, we've included them, but one doesn't challenge the sort of the general rule, it doesn't threaten the general rule. So if for example, I always use Marie Curie as an example because everyone seems to have heard of her, so Marie Curie won the Nobel Prize. In fact, she won 2. But if she's the only female scientist you've heard of, it's very easy to think, oh, Marie Curie was a bit weird. So she was this female scientist, but it's because she was a bit weird and not because women are good at science. And so we would just want to show that there were so many women doing so many things, despite all the obstacles in their path, that changes the general rule. We want that, and we want that to be general knowledge.
Well, a good point. But another phrase that stood out in the talk is, I'm not imitating a man, I'm claiming the title of human being. Ailsa, how can the idea that women are not simply just human being actually hold us back?
Well, because I think it makes us think of ourselves as support people. You know, I can't think of a better way of phrasing it. So we think about what we should do in terms of what's okay with everybody else and what fits in, rather than what we want. And I think it also makes us afraid of making mistakes, of not being perfect. So somehow we kind of shy away from ambition. You know, there's this weird sense that women are somehow less than men. You know, they're kind of less important, less individual, less clever. But at the same time, kind of morally superior. You know, we're always good and we're always patient and we're always kind. So we're saying, you know, well, look at these women. They were, you know, alive and active in the world in body and mind, without being perfect. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that's what women are.
Right, yes, yeah. Women are equally important. So Ailsa, how has On This Day She changed your life?
Wow. Well, I guess it's made me angrier, but it's also made me happier, I think. I think I compare my work less with other people's. And, you know, I think, well, this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm making and putting out into the world. And, you know, that's what it is. And that's enough. I'm a writer, and so I often, obviously I spent a lot of time on my own. So it's always a treat to have a project that involves other people. And I love working with Tania and Joe. We're very different, you know. On This Day She's 3 mothers, but I think we complement each other really well. And yeah, it's just a lovely thing to be doing.
Yeah, mother with the baby. On
this day, yes, our baby.
Yes, baby's born. So what would you like the long-term impact of On This Day She to be?
Well, you know, we want to change the world, one tweet at a time. Yeah, we want it to be known to everybody, you know, the impact that women have had on history and throughout history. And we don't want that just to be known by a few dedicated historians. And so we hope that knowledge then will change the way women are seen and change the way women look at themselves. Yeah.
What I can see now is from zero to hero. Okay. and now we can expect a book as well. Is that right?
Yes. You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, On This Day She. It's coming out in the autumn with Bonnier Books. We're very excited about it. Yeah, so follow us on Twitter for more details. This is the first public announcement, so yeah.
Yes, well, you at least here got more than 100 audience from all over the world, exclusive. Okay. Yeah. Now we have talked about lockdown and coronavirus. Yeah. What has your experience been so far? Is there any lockdown activity you have been doing that you would recommend to others?
Well, so my experience so far, I guess like everybody's, has been quite mixed. Mm-hmm. So it's lovely having my kids at home. So my daughter's back from university and my son should be doing horrible exams, but doesn't have to do them. So that's all really nice. And we're watching Buffy, the Vampire Slayer. Do you know it? The TV series, which we all really love. It's got so many great characters, so many great women characters. So that's a lovely thing. But no, I have bad days as well. It turns out that pandemic plus perimenopause is quite a heady combination, as I'm sure a lot of women are finding. What would I recommend? Oh, I think do whatever you want, really, as much as possible. And maybe what I've tried to do, I think, is kind of use it a little bit in the way that I use rage as a kind of energy. So to try and do something that I wouldn't have done if there hadn't been a pandemic. So I'm learning a bit of Swedish on an app on my phone. And I'm loving that. It's so many lovely new words, lovely sounds. So yeah, that's a really nice thing.
Wow. I hope one day you learn how to write your Chinese name. Ailsa, I teach
Yeah,
you.
yeah, that
Come
would be
to my center. Welcome to Wai Yin. But how could coronavirus, affect the fight for gender equality? Are you optimistic about the future or concerned?
Well, I think it could go either way, really, couldn't it? I mean, I think on the one hand, the virus and the lockdown has made people really aware of who are the key workers that actually keep a country going, and that a lot of those people are women. Mm-hmm. How important care jobs are that are traditionally taken on by women. So I hope that this might lead to those jobs being better respected and the women and men who do those jobs being better paid. On the other hand, as Sarah was talking about before, there's been this horrible rise in domestic violence and women being murdered at home during lockdown, which is just really depressing, and doesn't, bode well for the way women are seen and treated. And I think more generally, I get the feeling that, being at home, people are kind of sliding into kind of traditional roles a bit. And this is purely anecdotal and not academic, but I kind of, that women are generally taking on the homeschooling, for example, or if there's extra cleaning that's kind of turned up because of coronavirus, that maybe more often it's women that are taking that on. But no, I have to be optimistic, and I think that a lot of women will, use the rage that comes out of this pandemic experience creatively, and I'm actually really excited to see what comes next. I think there could be a lot of changes, and I think a lot of them could be really positive.
Yes, a lot of venture actually.
Yeah,
and you're absolutely right. I think during the pandemic, I've been locked down. Even our community deal with a lot of domestic violence, what we unexpected. I think for Chinese community, we suffer more for the racism we highlight here.
Yeah.
And personally, I believe women can break through the cocoon and be empowered like a butterfly. It's what you're talking about. Have there any women making history during this pandemic that you think can be a candidate for inclusion in on this stage?
Could you just repeat that? Because
have there,
stop for me for a minute then.
Yeah, have there been any women making history during this pandemic that you think will be candidate for inclusion in on this stage?
Oh yes, definitely. I mean, a lot of people have talked about, how women leaders seem to have dealt with this better generally. But one that I read about a week ago is a woman called K.K. Shailaja, who is the health minister in Kerala in India. And she was on this totally from the beginning, when it was nowhere near India. She heard about it and she met with people and she put structures in place. And so, by last week, they'd only had 4 corona deaths in Kerala out of, a population of 35 million. So I think by the same proportion, we maybe should have had 7 deaths in the UK. I think she's amazing. She used to be a secondary school science teacher, but now they call her coronavirus slayer, which is a little bit like Buffy. And then a friend told me that Kerala has a long tradition of education for women and also of women leaders. So, Shailaja is obviously coming out of this culture of respecting women's authority. And they're certainly reaping the benefits of that at the moment. Yeah.
Well, I think we are making history today.
Yeah.
With our diverse international audience here. And then we are creating a legacy now. So thanks Ailsa. Thanks Ailsa.
Oh, thank you.
Your name. But now I've got a question from the audience.
Okay.
Yeah. To ask you, this is Lucy James. She say, how do you identify the woman for on this stage 3?
So for the Twitter account, when we started off, we really targeted trying to find dates because, we wanted to fill up our calendar for the year. So we have a shared Google calendar that we all add women into, and then we take it in turns to write the tweets. We do a week at a time. So we did a lot of research online, and our criteria were really just that those women had had an impact on the world, and as we've talked about before, whether that be kind of positive or negative. And we wanted as broad a range as possible, so from all different time periods and from all over the world, just so we could make it as diverse as possible. And we try and get a variety kind of within the week, so we don't want, you know, maybe always 3 scientists in a row or whatever. The internet can be a little bit American or US weighted, so we try and kind of counter that, and we get as much information as we can also from books. But of course we're doing this generally, you know, on our own time and unpaid, so, you know, it's always limited a little bit by, you know, how much time we have. So yeah, just interesting women. It's actually been more difficult choosing the women for the book because we're limited to 366. Wow. So yeah, we've had some, you know, heated debates about that between the 3 of us, and we've allowed each of us a few women who were kind of non-negotiable. You know, I will die on the hill of having this woman in the book. But we've just tried to keep it again as diverse as possible, and although there is probably a weighting towards British speaking women, English speaking women, just to keep it diverse, and just so that as many people as possible
you're talking about
find someone that they can kind of identify with and that they feel interested in.
I think you do inspire now a lot of people outside the country.
I hope so.
Now I've got other question here. It's from Rebecca Stephen.
Okay.
Say, I work in the leadership recruitment and development, and it frustrates me that a woman has to work much harder to reach a leadership level role. They are often way more experienced as a candidate in an interview than the male candidates. What is your view on what else we could be doing to change this? This is a high profile topic that has been a focus for quite a few years, but why it's not changing enough?
It's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, I think it's everywhere, isn't it? That sense that women don't put themselves forward for things unless they feel incredibly well qualified for it. I mean, I see it even, you know, in the poetry world, that women will call themselves a beginner when they've been writing poetry for 15 and 20 years, and that a man will expect to have a book out within, you know, 6 months of writing his first poem. So, I mean, I don't know a massive amount about the corporate world, but I think it's about changing views on both sides, isn't it? So it's changing women's view of themselves as, you know, you have to be perfect in order to do whatever, you have to be the best in order to be allowed to do that. But it's also changing men's views and seeing so that women in these roles seem more natural and less, you know, not tokens. You know, because I think it's more difficult to put yourself forward for something if you feel like you're the only one.
Okay, thank you.
If that answers
now, okay, fair point. I got other question from the audience. Called Elaine Mills. She say, this question for you, Ailsa. When we talk about women's contribution, how can we ensure being women, BAME women, are included in the narrative as so often being contribution, BAME women contribution are excluded? As you say, a lot of health professionals are women, and BAME women in particular.
Yes, so I think it's something that, I mean, we've become, I hope, more and more aware of the different types of histories that have been invisible, and the way they all kind of intersect with each other, so that, you know, women's history has been invisible, but also BAME history you know, gay and lesbian history. So for us personally, in our Twitter account and with the book, it's just trying as much as possible to, not only in the women that we discuss, to be as diverse as possible and to make sure those BAME narratives are included, but also to be aware of the language that we use when we talk about everybody, you know, because so much of prejudice is just within language. You know, so one thing that we've become very aware of is, you know, when we're reading about North American history and people refer to, in history books, you know, refer to slaves, you know, that sounds like those people were, you know, that being a slave is somehow their identity, rather than talking about them as being people who had been enslaved, you know, that it was something that was done to them. So yeah, I think it has to be an awareness all the time of how diverse we are, and that we're seeing these other narratives.
Especially you mentioned about language and also about cultural understanding. That's very different perception, and how we can change the people's perception in a different way. Now, other question for you, Ailsa, from Penny Tate, to say, are there any women around today that you think will be thought of as great woman in 100 years' time? Wow.
Blimey. Oh. Can't
think of it.
I've got totally
on your head. Huh?
So many women. I think Serena Williams is a really inspirational woman. That's the one that comes into my mind. So many. Sorry.
Okay, that is great. No problem.
It might come to me.
It come back. It will come back. Okay. Now I got other question from Case B. She asks you, what is your opinion of a book such as Rebel Girls and Women Who Changed History for Children? How can we make our school curriculum have more of focus on women?
So I think these books are great. And I think it's wonderful that publishers, including children's publishers, seem to have discovered women in the last few years. I think that they have a focus on what I would call a slight airbrushing sometimes of these women's characters, but I think that's fine in the sense that they're for children's books. I think it's something that books aimed at adults shouldn't drift into, for the reasons that we talked about before. I think we need to say, you know, these are human beings with flaws. But still, I think it's fantastic. And I think it would make a massive difference if this history was better known in schools. You know, I've gone in and done a couple of school workshops about women in history and about On This Day She. And I always find it really inspiring, not only seeing how the girls take to it, but how some boys are very challenged by it and get very cross that they're being asked to write about women and they don't identify with that person. But a lot of them have really sort of taken that on board and sought common ground with the woman, you know, so it might be a female footballer and they play football, or, you know, a scientist or a writer and they like writing or whatever. And so they see the woman as a human being and not as a woman. And that's been really lovely, actually. So yeah, it would be great if there was more of that, and there were more women on, you know, history curriculums, literary curriculums. Yeah.
Wow, thank you. Well, I've got other question from Wow. She said, what's the difference between rage and passion?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. Well, that's a really interesting question.
Yes,
is it how we load it? We can load passion much more positively, can't we, than rage? But passion is also can also be really negative. I suppose passion is whether it ends up having a positive or negative output, it's a love for something, isn't it? And it's an attachment to something and a desire, whereas rage is a rejection of something. It's a sense of being attacked, I think, and a reaction to attack. But I think they're both very powerful, aren't they? And both certainly have the potential of being negative and positive.
That's the energy running your body.
Yeah, and energy.
Go together, drive things forward.
Yeah.
So now the audience has got some inspirational women for you. We have some example of women who will be of as great in 100 years' time. Michelle Obama.
Oh, shit, yes.
Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah.
Jacinda Ardern.
Yes, she's the New Zealand
okay.
Prime Minister or President, Prime Minister.
Oh, J.K. Rowling.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got one in Manchester, our Dr. Sylvia Sham. She was CEO of Wai Yin, but she's passed away, left us 3 years ago, my best friend.
Yeah.
Now, I've got another question for you. Is from Damaris. How do you deal with those who campaign that your efforts are just political correctness or tokenism?
Well, we don't have a lot of that. I mean, if we have criticism on Twitter, I mean, most people really who follow the account obviously follow it because they like it. So I guess we're maybe protected from criticism in some ways. So we do get some people correcting sometimes our historical facts, which, you know, is good because sometimes we have got things wrong despite our best efforts. Some people do that in a really nice way. Some people do it in quite a rude way. We get people criticizing us, as I've said before, because we include somebody who isn't lovely. We've had a few racist and sexist comments, which in general we ignore because I kind of feel like engaging with that is maybe not very helpful. I don't think we've been accused of political correctness so far. Joe and Tania might disagree, and I'll talk to them about this later, but yeah, so far I think we've been okay.
Thanks, Ailsa. Now, the other question from Joanne Conway. Is there any content that you can share or advise on delivering these sessions on women history in school so we can volunteer to deliver in our local schools?
Ooh, that's a great question. So I think just have a great range of women. So if you're talking about women, you know, I picked, how many did I talk about? 4 or 5? Yeah. With a great range of fields. So I had a footballer, an environmentalist, because a lot of young people are really, you know, really obviously concerned about the environment, and that's an area that they're often very active in and quite radical in. And so they're keen to see foremothers, you know, examples of people who've done that before. And my take on it has been to sort of talk about the women, give them the stories, show them photos of the women so they have a kind of, they can kind of imagine them a bit, and then get them to write something in the woman's voice. So they really have to try and put themselves in that woman's shoes, and it might be, you know, it might be a poem if they're, you know, if they're creative writing people, or it might be a letter that the woman wrote to the newspaper protesting about something, or it might be, yes, I can't think of the other example now, but yes, to really, so, and I think that's quite powerful because it, as I say, it enables them to see the women as human beings, and yeah, encourages an identification rather than this sense of, well, people in history are kind of over there and separate from us, and we couldn't ever be like that or be that person. Yeah, does that help?
Yeah,
but definitely volunteer at your schools.
Yeah,
because schools
you would love to do it.
Yeah, and schools are so thrilled for people to come in and provide, you know, new stimulation and get conversations going. Yeah, I mean, that's been my experience anyway.
You'll be going to be busy. I got another question from Danny. It's saying, my great woman is Agnes Smedley. Did you include her, Ailsa?
Give me the name again.
Agnes Smedley. Agnes.
Oh, we haven't had her so far. She's an author, isn't she? Daughters of Earth. I don't think we've had her yet, but I'll put her on the list as soon as this is finished.
on the list, on the waiting, coming up.
Yeah. Calendar is full. We're putting women in the calendar now for 2021, and we just can't keep up.
Wow. Okay, that's good. Now that's the last one.
Okay.
And I don't have any more questions from the audience, but it was great. We got over 100 audience.
That's amazing.
Yeah, listen to you, and then they are bringing a lot of different questions, different angle.
Yeah.
To talk about it on this stage too, and looking forward to hear your book. And also remind us, and during this lockdown, we have created a new chapter today. This is a new chapter.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I haven't done this before.
No, I've never
I have a new experience.
Yeah.
And look, my first time get your Chinese name, Ailsa.
Yeah, I love it. So you have to show me how to write it. Show me how to write it.
Definitely will. Yeah. Now I'll pass over to Sarah now.
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Just so much. I mean, the chat box was going crazy the entire time. There's so much in there. Yeah, thank you both so very, very much for such an engaging, beautiful, wonderful, warm, inspiring time. There are three things I guess we really want to highlight for you all, and they are in the chat box. One, donations to the Pankhurst. The links are there. Please open up now. You can come back later. Thanks again to CMS UK. Register for Hilary Cottam, 11th of June. Please help us by sharing with others. If you've enjoyed today, spread the message. You know, we've done this from a standing start. We're so grateful to you all for joining us. Spread the word. Come along on the 11th of June at 2:30. Register on your Eventbrite. Volunteer for QBC. So as a coach, or in another capacity. The brilliant Becky Gray has produced our series today. She's a journalist with BBC Sport. She's a volunteer, she's not a coach. So we're looking for volunteers all the time. We know you've got so many other webinars you could be choosing, and you chose this one. So from the bottom of our hearts, we're really grateful and we hope you're inspired. In closing, thanks so much to Abby Hopkirk, the events officer from Alliance Manchester Business School. If you're willing, I'll say again, Ailsa Circle. Thank you so much.